There are two focuses to our show today. First, congratulations to those of you who've held on and we're now over $800 a share for Tesla. We'll be reviewing that a bit. We're also primarily covering the fact that in Britain, because of gas shortages, Tesla's sales are scheduled to boom if we can get more production coming out of Germany and Austin. And then finally, we review the fact that there's a German rental car company that's gotten rid of all of the other EVs except for Tesla. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is your first time, welcome. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. We also want to thank our Patreon supporters. If you enjoy the show and like better tips and ideas on trading, please join us on Patreon, especially as we head into earnings next week on the 20th when it comes to Tesla. We also wanted to remind you that this is a copyrighted broadcast. All comments made here, all rights are reserved. So I wanted to review today the fact that there's something really amazing happening, which is always the case for Tesla these days. What I wanted to emphasize today is the fact that there's a very fascinating situation going on where we've been sort of working on documenting the Tesla miracle over time. So I have to say I'm stunned at the number of data points and strange coincidences that result in Tesla's stock price being boosted by sort of strange coincidences in the marketplace that actually really boost the stock of Tesla and the number of vehicles sold, produced and sold, etc. We all know already that Elon, through his own programming technique and knowledge, has been able to weather the shortage of chip storm by pulling chips from other devices, i.e. The megapacks, as well as reprogramming them from one use to another so that he can continue to grow profit and revenue in the process. Well, the latest one I wanted to review that I'm kind of stunned by is there was an article in the New York Times and broadly available regarding the fact that currently there's a shortage of gas in the United Kingdom, in particular Britain. So the genesis of this is with the Brexit change, there were as many as 20,000 truck drivers who left England and went elsewhere. And so now you have an interesting problem where one of the primary goods they were moving was oil or gasoline to the gas stations. And now they have shortages such that you have people in extremely long lines trying to get access to the fuel. And for the fuel that is available, there's actually hoarding going on so that even if you do get up there, you're running out of fuel on a regular basis at these gas stations. So I'd have to say that I can just see the image of the Tesla vehicles just driving by the gas stations right now. And for the well-heeled Tesla customers, they're now over at the Tesla in line saying that this might be a great opportunity to make the transition. According to what we read, for now, there is a shortage and there's a threat to actually bring out the military to make sure this fuel is disseminated or distributed. But in the meantime, there's basically chaos. And it turns out that it's not only a fuel impacting situation, but for example, food distribution is also an issue relative to these truck drivers. So you have empty shelves even at grocery stores, et cetera. So I think definitely this should be worked out. But in the interim, I really think it puts the screws to a large number of people to say, hey, I think it might be time to look at electric vehicles. And if we're going to look electric, let's actually go ahead and look at EVs like Tesla. And it's another example of the Tesla miracle where it's like, how does this happen? I mean, how does it happen now? And how does it happen as Tesla is ramping? And look at how it's going to affect their ability to produce and maintain the backlog of in-demand products that are out there. Unbelievable. But shows another reason why it's a great thing to invest in Tesla. Now, I wanted to next move on to a second piece of news that's come out, which is that according to a report provided by Electric, they pointed out that there's a German rental car company that has elected to no longer offer any electric vehicles in their rental fleet unless it's a Tesla. They articulated problems, for example, that they've had with different manufacturers. The first example they provided was lack of over-air updates from the folks at Porsche results in users have to go to the dealers in order to get updates, as one example cited. There's also issues with access to repair parts and repair process on vehicles that might need work. And so they were stocking the Kona, the Taycan, obviously Tesla, and they're just finding that it's difficult to conduct business unless they stick with Tesla as their focused supplier of EVs. So, like I said, the Tesla miracle rolls on. I wanted to particularly focus on this issue because there is something called the tipping point. So if you go back and look at how things worked out between Nokia, Apple, and Samsung, in particular when it came to sales of cell phone, Nokia sort of dominated this space for a long time, not unlike how GM or the other OEMs, be it Mercedes or VW, dominated regular ICE vehicles and still dominated. But now you have Tesla entering, and we're entering into this very strange space where from one type of customer, in this case you'd have to say is, let's say it's a rental car company, but there are certain customers that are a precursor to what you're going to see happening across the board. And I really think that where we are now is, for example, if Tesla was at 5 to 10 million vehicles being sold per year, they would actually enter a zone where the consumers would basically be considering a difference between Apple and Samsung, or in this case, let's say VW and Tesla, and everybody else would end up with fairly minor pieces of the auto business. We're not at that numeric space yet, but what's starting to happen is that customers are starting to say, hey, why bother considering other options? And as a result, you're ending up with this situation. In particular, one of the things that I'm amazed by to watch, and we were thinking about doing it as a completely different show, but I'm going to go ahead and cover it here, and that is that there's a concept in economics called marginal utility. So when you look in Silicon Valley, if you have, let's say, an iPhone, if you look at it as your old Nokia, think of all the things that the iPhone does that the Nokia couldn't. The iPhone has that large screen, you can read stuff on the internet. Nokia didn't at that point. The apps that are on it, consumers have gravitated to them and they wanted a blank screen, not keys, even though the keys felt better initially. So I'm emphasizing sort of this look because I particularly was focused on what is the future for our folks or our friends over at Lucid, and probably not Rivian because they do have the backup of all the Amazon vehicles that they're doing, even if their SUV doesn't do that great. But, you know, Rivian, I believe, is a slightly similar situation to NIO. The reason I say that is that it turns out that Rivian is in a situation, one of their backers is Saudi government. And so if they were a traditional auto company backed by traditional entities and then went public in the manner that they did, there's actually a good chance, I believe, that that company goes out of business. And the reason is that, yes, their vehicles are going 500 miles in range. They have a large number of Tesla employees that are there helping to facilitate the vehicles that they have going. But the challenge that they're having is, yes, you want the 500 miles of range, and for the price that they're giving is not bad. But the challenge that comes up is that because Tesla has a supercharger network, it blunts largely the impact of that vehicle. If you look at the data, there's this thing that says that most people do most of their driving within 5 or 10 miles of their homes. So it's a very high likelihood that a large percentage of Tesla customers are using their vehicles for around town activity and occasionally go long distance. So if your principal competitive advantage over Tesla is that long distance, it's not much of an advantage to deal with the onslaught that Tesla offers in terms of dealers across the country, parts availability, ability to do everything you need to do with your car, be it go long distance and charge it up. If it gets cold in a certain area and you lose range, can you quickly charge it? Do you have your own set of superchargers? There are all these questions that lurk out there for not only Lucid, but for all these other competitors. Another component, I think, of the Lucid nightmare is I think they made a huge mistake choosing to do the sedan before they did the SUV. As you know, as soon as Elon saw it, he knew that the Model Y would be Tesla's #1 seller globally and might outsell other vehicles globally as well. And the reason for that is real estate prices. As they rise, most consumers are choosing the SUV form factor because it gives all kinds of flexibility that a sedan does not. So I was very surprised to see the folks at Lucid elect to deliver a sedan and not an SUV, and I think this was a mistake. And they do have plans to bring out this next vehicle. But what I'm not getting is what happens when folks like Mercedes or VW or the other entities, come up with legitimate vehicles and they work out the bugs for those vehicles. I have a very clogged marketplace with a lot of solutions that are somewhat similar. But for example, in VW's case, Mercedes' case, they have a large install base of places for vehicles to be charged, repaired. They have the brand awareness already. There are all these different ways that they're at a competitive advantage over what's happening at Lucid. I actually thought Lucid/Rivian would actually be a huge competition for Tesla going forward until Elon introduced the 4680. As you know, both of those companies have elected to do the 2170 form factor that Tesla is using currently. And so you would think that, hey, if it's a similar company in all these ways, they should get a lot of traction. But I really think that, it's clear who the winner is, and the winner is Tesla. And there are a lot of folks that are working hard to catch up, but I don't really see them able to do that despite their best efforts. So I would have to say that, I can see why Tesla's stock price is up. Yes, the analysts have given us upgrades. I believe we're going to see great numbers coming out from the higher production numbers because we're exceeding expectations from our analysts, and we have a large amount of production coming on from multiple locations that are likely double, if not triple, the ability of Tesla to produce. So as long as this chip thing gets done reasonably well in a reasonable amount of time, it's hard not to see Tesla do fantastic numbers. And so therefore, obviously, we're going to keep our eyes peeled and provide as much information as we can on what's going on with this and assist you in any and all types of guidance that we can provide. So I would say that I know of friends that have invested in Lucid or NIO, some of these companies, and in the short term, I think they'll do well. But, as I look at the backlog size that Tesla has and the new factories that are opening and the slowness with which competitors are entering the marketplace with their new products, I just have to say that this looks like a bonanza for Tesla and really bad news for all of their competitors, regardless of size. One of the mysteries that I'm looking forward to figuring out is Lucid doesn't have to be excellent in their performance or execution because they've got some very deep pockets behind them. But the question I'm wondering about is, how long can they stick around if they're not able to get to scale, both in production and sales, and then sort of maintain some momentum there? I guess the one lucid last comment I would make is um, there's this thing that went on in regular auto, which was how good are you between 100 and 200 miles an hour? And it turns out that most people, based on crowdedness of where they live, 90% of the time, they're moving sub 80 miles an hour in that 70 mile an hour range. And they may enjoy some accelerated speed on takeoff and so forth. But basically, the 500-mile range and the faster acceleration that comes from Lucid are definitely nice features. The thing, though, is that with Tesla in the ballpark on both areas, and now possibly coming out with way lower costs so they can undercut competitors, even those sort of sister companies or baby companies to Tesla that are going on, I think the battle is going to be really interesting right here, and I think that Tesla is definitely a winner. I got a question from one of our viewers regarding what did I think about Toyota's circumstance. And I think the folks at Toyota are brilliant. They build some great products. You know, they dominate ICE in terms of the largest number of sales and brand recognition. But the thing that I found interesting is they came up with a strategy where they're actually working on supercharging or graphene-based solutions that allow their vehicles to charge faster, et cetera. And as we go to level 3 chargers everywhere, you know, there might be an advantage there of this product by it can charge up in 5 to 7 minutes versus Tesla's in that 15-minute zone for those level 3 chargers. But again, there is a difference, but by the time these products start hitting 4 or 5 years from now, when they have it all figured out, will it really matter? Because you're going to have those long distance customers who worry about this. But what about the customers that drive relatively short distances and they don't ever go to the superchargers because they're charging at home? So they really don't care about that because they're managing the process of energy through their vehicles. So all I'm saying is that some of the newer technologies coming on, Tesla will be there if there are great solutions developed. But I really think that they've picked the sweet spot of solution delivery that might come from electric vehicles. And they're carefully dominating that space through a number of initiatives, be it the size of the supercharger network, you know, new battery technology that we've talked about, et cetera. And in fact, it's kind of fascinating right now because instead of what you would think would happen, which would be the high end of battery production being the dominant solution, you know, LPF and other battery solutions that allow you to drop the price and giving up some performance as you do so, consumers are willing to do that to try to get better value from their vehicle by giving up some performance to get a better cost of getting into the vehicle. So, you know, I'd say stay tuned. You know, Tesla is basically running a monopoly right now as other companies try to get their processing game together. And I think that, you know, if they're not careful, it could be a rout, but it does take time to build factories and get them smoothly running to deliver all that new production. And I believe Tesla is definitely executing that well. So again, congratulations to those of you who are making money right now as Tesla crosses over 800. I would say that I'm a little bit nervous about the 800 level. The closer we are to 800, the higher the likelihood that market makers want to take the stock down on Friday below that number in order to make money bankrupting or getting rid of those above 800 in what they're doing. You know, I think getting out 2-3 weeks is a really smart move when it comes to options in this space, because even if Tesla delivers great numbers, we have the 3-day rule, and then we have to add on the fact that the market makers will work very hard to make sure they and their ilk make a lot of money and the average consumer gets smashed. So I will stay tuned, look forward to being part of the information flow as this happens. And again, Tesla is an awesome company with some great prospects, and it's really showing up in the stock price. So next, we wanted to note we do have some SpaceX shares. We also want to note that you can join us on Patreon if you'd like some help with sort of trade thought process and implementation. We do some direct trade consulting if you'd like help in the process for setting up accounts and techniques and strategies. I actually have, so we have different people at different levels of intensity when it comes to, what they're doing with their Tesla investing. I just discovered something. If you go to the NASDAQ website and type in Tesla, they'll actually show you the short interest that's open on Tesla currently and going backwards. So I think that might be a useful piece of information as well to kind of understand more about what's the bias that we might see coming from the market makers when it comes to Tesla's stock price. Any rate, glad we're able to get this show in now. Again, congratulations. We now switch to our health tips. My health tip today is, I want to say, slightly crazy. I met a gentleman who makes prostheses. So, and I asked him what that was about, and he was saying, if you think about car accidents, people that have diabetes of different types, one of the things he mentioned to me were there are certain people, for example, who lose feeling in their feet, and they may get a cut, and before they realize there's a problem, it becomes infected and they lose the foot, and now you have to have a new one made. So I met a gentleman who's at the University of Michigan, and that's what his job is. And I'd never heard of somebody who was specially trained, or never met anybody who was specially trained in building these devices. And so I was actually impressed to hear that there's a board certification process, there's a master's degree you can get in the field. And I was just stunned at how sophisticated it is, but it really highlighted the whole discussion of, hey, do you really want to cut back on sugar consumption as would manage blood sugar and eliminate potential for any diabetes issues to come forward? So I also want to note we have more health tips below. The one I will highly recommend is try not to eat within 4 hours of going to bed, ideally minimum 2 hours to let the food digest so that you don't have the stomach bile rolling into your upper respiratory area and causing cancer. So any rate, we also are going to have our usual, not today, but on our next show. Thank you for joining us. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Tschüss, German. Au revoir.